All right, first of all, I'd like to begin by thanking everyone who organized this event and everyone who's participated. I think so far there have been some interesting conversations, and I'm very excited to be here. The title of my paper is Librarian is Intellectual Craft, and I've got a lot that I'd like to discuss, so I might as well just begin. I do want to say that, like Tina, I'm a PowerPoint minimalist, so there might not, I don't know, won't be so much content there. To state that a discourse of technological transformation has had a profound impact on the ways in which people labor in capitalist, liberal, democratic societies seems so commonplace that it's hardly worth noting. I'm sure everyone here is sort of familiar with this consistent popular culture trope about the idea that technology is constantly transforming societies, and in order to thrive in these societies, laborers and social actors must adapt to these changes, not only to simply prosper, but to just simply survive. The recent recession that began in 2008 has only enhanced this sense of precarity. And I think it should also be really apparent that when a discourse of this type becomes untethered to an examination of how specific social, economic, and political institutions and I guess situations influence power relationships within a particular society, that social actors will find their agency to implement these changes diminish. Now, what does that mean for those of us who engage in the labor of organizing information in a broadly defined public good, especially in a democratic society? Obviously, this kind of deterministic conception of technological transformation can limit the discursive terrain upon which these changes can be implemented. In this paper, I argue that an ideal of intellectual craft is one way to kind of think about working through these transformations. Oops, wrong way. Of course, and that it basically creates a kind of ideal type with which we can then examine and manage these changes. Of course, we have a kind of classical conception of craftsmanship, I think exemplified here, and sort of discussing the gendered conceptions of that would be a whole other conversation. But I think it's very rare that people think of kind of the day-to-day practice in libraries, organizations that, or institutions that organize information as being something that contains a bodily practice. So the two key works on craft that I'm using to kind of construct this, I guess, this typology are Richard Sinnett's recent work called The Craftsman, and the work of the famous sociologist C. Wright Mills. So there's an appendix to his classic Sociological Imagination, which I'm sure many of you might have read had you taken a freshman sociology course, right? The first chapter is frequently assigned. But anyways, in the Sociological Imagination, there's an appendix that I recently read, and he really talks about intellectual craftsmanship for the social science, for social scientists. So in my typology that I've sort of developed from these ideas, of course, like any typology, it's completely contestable. It's a normative ideal, and it's in the Librarian tradition, right? Any typology is just a set of analytical tools that we can then use to examine social reality, right? Or a specific instance of that kind of reality. So I really don't have time to get into the specifics of that, but I guess I'll just kind of outline what this typology is for me in my paper. Firstly, librarianship, driven by an ideal of intellectual craft, will involve a direct engagement with the material, and direct engagement in the process of collection, dissemination, and maintenance. And definitely related to that is this idea that every specific element, that there's an understanding on the part of the craftsperson of the specific elements to the whole of that entity. So for example, we can think of somebody creating a chair into craft work, the craft person would understand how the arm of that chair would relate to the construction of the rest of that chair, whereas in industrial manufacturing, you're just making one arm over and over again, right? So that the kind of totality of the space you're working in or the entity you're working with sort of becomes abstract, and you can't understand it. Or you don't understand the relation, specific elements to the whole. And I think, especially in, I guess, professions where the organization of information is very important, I would argue that kind of understanding the larger social space of a particular element is also important. So, for example, kind of understanding the literature about something or the conversations that exist in various discourse communities, and kind of having an understanding of how the specific context in which you're working relates to this broader kind of social world. So that's the really first element. Secondly, of course, autonomy in practice. I think this is really key. So that you're sort of applying accrued knowledge and experience freely and autonomously and making your own decisions in the application of your craft and the playing of your craft, right? So kind of understand how a particular item is created through your own autonomous practice. And of course, finally, creating a participatory exchange of knowledge, ideas, and experience in a particular unit. So a communicative sort of collective exchange of ideas in working on a particular goal. And I know that this is common, for example, in the private sector. Teamwork on particular projects is a very common management strategy for many project-based kind of institutional organizations. So that's really important to think about as well. So these are my kind of three conceptions of intellectual craft. Of course, this is entirely contestable, as I mentioned, so there you have it. I think it's also, now, one of the things, and kind of moving ahead, is I want to think about the romanticization of craft. I think, probably one of the most recent works about this idea of craft in the popular culture has been Matthew Crawford's Shop Class as Soul Craft. Excuse me, a little difficulty with the pronunciation. And this book has been very popular, and specifically for Crawford, the application of the hands through using experience sort of breaks through the abstractions of, I guess, post-Fordist forms of work organization, in that it gives the individual a kind of clear conception of excellence in the application of their work, right? So, for example, if you're an electrician, right, you just have one criteria that you can use to examine whether or not your work was good. Light turns on, right? There's a clear instrumental kind of evaluation there. I guess my issue with Crawford is that he doesn't really examine, I guess, the first element of my typology. He doesn't end with a broad kind of social or political program. He's just more interested in, I think, compelling people from an academic background to consider handwork as something that has sort of meaning, but he doesn't really get into, I think, this idea of the relation of specific applications to a more general kind of social structure. Now, I guess what I want to argue is that I think one of the great kind of social, I think maybe underexamined social developments, I guess, of social democracies in the 20th century was the advent of the democratization of leisure. And I guess I want to think about that as it relates to the concept of craft, because I'm going to examine, I guess, user-generated content online, user-generated classification. But I guess I want to take a step back and really think about, hobbyism. And I kind of put this example of somebody working in a car on the driveway. I think in the 20th century, for many people, the kind of free time available with the advent of the 8-hour day was considerable. Now, it's important to realize that there were consistent populations left out of this bounty of post-war kind of social democratic leisure, people of color, women, of course. These are all important considerations. But at the same time, if you look at the 19th century, right, this realm of leisure did expand greatly for many people in the United States. And although cultural critics, both the left and the right, would sort of excoriate the masses for being, I'm thinking of Horkheimer and Adorno, the culture industry, that kind of thing, would excoriate the masses for being intoxicated by, Hollywood fantasy. I think that, people had opportunities to work on their cars, and we see this element, this kind of now, I know in my neighborhood, for example, in Brooklyn, there are all sorts of knitting yarn stores that are available. Though as a rational economic actor, it would make more sense to buy a sweater at Walmart, right? People still donate a considerable amount of time to craft, right? Within the context of leisure, as something separate from their wage work. Now, let's think. I'm going somewhere with this. So, user-generated content online, the creation of folksonomies. I'm sure everybody here has been hearing about this for many years. You're probably tired of it. I'm not going to really, but what I want to think about it in this way is that it is really, and in terms of the framework of intellectual craft, I really believe that adding content to material online is a great way to discuss these contradictions. Because I think every time someone adds a tag to something on Flickr, for example, right, they are engaging in elements of craft work, I would argue, right? They're, even if it's the most, I guess, non-specific, kind of amateurish tag, right, that maybe doesn't use what you would recognize as a controlled vocabulary. I'm not a catalogger, so I'm excited. But I think this really illustrates a lot of these kind of issues. But so you can see checking each other to see if this is a birder who, of course, is very interested in classification. This is a part of their sort of hang of craft. But I guess what I want to take exception to is there's a 2007 online essay by Clay Shirky. He's kind of this thinker about these issues, where he really argues that that library classification systems, for example, were best designed to organize the books on the shelf. I know earlier someone was talking about the Dewey religion system, right? And he uses this example as well, but he goes on to argue that this transformation in that the algorithms and the scalability issues involved with having a lot of taggers. I'm sure this is all familiar to you, but by having a lot of taggers add this stuff, these schemes are much better. The worst amateur classification schemes are much better than any professional one, because particularly with regards to robustness and cost of creation. That's Shirky directly. So, basically what Shirky is saying is that hobbyists, right, people in their leisure time, engage in craft work, right? And I think also anybody who has engaged in organizing information understands the sort of desire that you have to, when you, for example, take a photo, you upload it to Flickr, you want to add value to it, right? You want to make it accessible. You want to tag it, create access points, so on and so forth. Because you have this sort of intrinsic, let's not get into essential kind of ideas about human activity, but I think most people throughout society do like laboring, right? They like this craft kind of endeavors. So this brings me to kind of basic conception in Marx. Good old Karl Marx. So of course, I don't know anybody who's read, there's this basic idea of surplus value. And for Marx, if you own the means of production, basically what you're all about is creating surplus, extracting surplus value. And of course, it's surplus because labor in the productive apparatus is what creates value. But so once you've got your revenue from the sort of productive apparatus, you pay your labor costs. You have to and you have to pay your fixed costs, and then of course surplus value. That's where you make your profit. Now, of course, with online participatory schemes, as if you're a commercial entity, you're pretty excited if you're trying to extract surplus value from this process because you've gotten rid of the labor costs, right? And that's just something that I think is articulated in this in this kind of description of the shirt he's talking about. Now, so it's easy to, I think this kind of creates a dilemma, right? Because I think it's more complicated than sort of setting compensated professional people working in institutions that support the organization of information in the public interest versus kind of hobbyists who are freely donating their labor. Now, there's a line of theorizing that comes from the Italian autonomous Marxist movement, discussed in an article by Soren Peterson called Loser-Generated Content that has really influenced my thinking on this matter. Really, in this relies on a very specific reading of the Grundrisse, where Marx predicts that knowledge and technological expertise objectified in machines will combine with the general intellect and create a kind of mode of production that's untethered to specific forms of labor. So what that means is that in a particular mode of production, this kind of relation becomes generalized right throughout society. And for these autonomous theorists, Antonio Negri, Paulo Verno kind of being the most key among them, this has this deterritorializing effect. So I know I'm using a lot of abstract terms here, but so for example, we can think if we want to create the greatest participatory scheme online in the public's interest, you're still adding value to the general intellect, right? And then, so for example, someone could come along and sort of use that structure, that knowledge, and apply it to extract surplus value, right? Now, of course, the secondary literature about Marx is so vast that I can't even begin to engage in all of it, or specifically thinking about ethical concerns. That wasn't something he was too interested in because he was concerned with these specific contradictions. So I guess where does that leave us? I think there is no really easy answer. I guess where I'm concluding is that we have to think about this in a broader social sense and, of course, embedded in advocacy for our own institutions. So on the one hand, I think we have to reaffirm the general importance of institutions and social actors who stress the importance of organizing information in a broadly defined public interest as kind of, I guess, a moral or ethical good, sort of beyond a narrow conception of absolute economic efficiency, right? This idea that it adds something to the public in a general democratic sphere. And of course, secondly, the expansion of both leisure coupled with employment. I think it's also important to understand that leisure is, I think, a right. So when we think of the 19th century labor movement, it was really organized around this conception of 8 hours for work, 8 hours for sleep, 8 hours for rest, and 8 hours for what we will. And that I'm kind of thinking about also expanding this sphere, of course, coupled with access to employment is important, and especially within the context of a recession, this seems like an absolutely utopian kind of wacky idea. But I think it is important. So specifically, kind of my thinking around this is heavily influenced by this work, the problem with work by Kathy Weeks. And where she discusses a lot of issues, but really she ends with advocating for guaranteed income and a reduction in the working day as a way to deal with a lot of specific feminist issues in feminist theory that she was concerned with, and imagining a sort of different work future. I guess that's it. Thank you.
We're off to a very energetic start this morning. Delightful. So we do have plenty of time for discussion, questions, and we've got one right away.
I thought it was very interesting comparison between the issues of free labor and paid labor. And I was wondering if you think that there's any value in because when I think about, you kind of blur the distinction between hobbyist and craftsman, and I think the difference in the craftsman is that there's this knowledge that you have to get through actually participating in the craft itself. And I think of catalogers as a really great example in that. Like, you can learn all the theory you want about cataloging, but until you actually sit down and work on the actual practice of cataloging, it's a very different thing. And the same thing with like a car. I could look at a car, but I don't know how to fix it. Someone has to spend a lot of time actually doing that. As compared to someone who's tagging online, like I don't know how much skill is involved in that free labor aspect of it, like how long it would take for someone to develop those skills. So I wonder if there's some value in exposing how much skill is involved in something like cataloging. That couldn't be turned, you would lose so much value through kind of free labor of tagging. I don't know, does that make sense, my question?
Yeah, I guess what my kind of thinking about this is that I think your point is absolutely correct. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that in sort of a social tagging situation that someone might not have this accrued experience. I was just arguing more that there is the possibility of craft being exemplified in that scheme. And even in the sort of, I guess, least experienced kind of manifestations of that work, there's still some engagement with the different kind of types that I was talking about. But so yeah, I guess it was just thinking that there is the possibility for someone to be fantastic in their hobby, right? That even though that's probably not common.
Okay, more questions?
John, yeah, I was thinking, I thought I interpreted at one point that there might be a moral obligation within craftsmanship to teach others as sort of a counterbalance to alienating labor, which I think according to that Crawford text, he calls quite literally idiotic, in the sense that it's private, cut off, impatient, detached. And I was wondering if that's the case, if there's sort of a moral component of teaching, what might the criteria be for a wise crafts person teacher?
That's an interesting question. I think it would, because I'm thinking about within a particular institution creating a sort of communicative, sort of public kind of space. This is where sort of somebody's not hoarding kind of expertise, but at the same time, it's got to be sort of negotiated, I think, through the actors within that space, right? I don't know. So, I guess if somebody has no interest in a particular skill themselves, then why would you want to force them to it? So I guess it's sort of creating these communicative kind of structures where sort of these kind of ideas and engagements are sort of really shared. So I guess that's sort of embedded in that. But yes, in terms of sort of spelling all that, that sort of absolute kind of participatory sharing space is, sounds good in the abstract, but then you get into messy, messy reality. But yeah, so that's sort of, yeah.
Would you think that by teaching the craft, you sort of limit the democratization of it? That you're kind of limiting, not anyone can do this now because we're teaching them the rules,
so to
speak. But if we want it to be completely democratic.
And I think that was why I was, the importance of this sort of conception of leisure versus work, I think, was a real, kind of contradiction that gets very messy when you start thinking about what, the very nature of what is work and leisure.
I have a question for Philip, if I'm not following.
Go ahead and then we'll...
Oh, no, I can wait. No, it's fine. I was wondering, in thinking about cataloging through kind of I really, really liked your presentation. I thought it was really interesting, the point of, the ethics can come through the notes. And I was wondering if you think about cataloging through a context view, how different catalogers could come from different positions and implement their ethics within those notes, if that makes sense. And I was wondering if you thought about that at all and how that could be taken up.
Sure, because the task isn't an easy one, is it?
Yeah.
But I think we can be objective. So, for example, there's and I use it so infrequently. I don't think I've ever used it. The mark tag for an award note. Well, if there is such a mark tag, what if the award has been revoked? Why can't one talk about the rescission of an award in such a mark. Why do we hesitate to do that? It doesn't matter whether we like the book or we don't like the book. We agree with the argument of the book or we disagree with the argument of the book. We can be objective about that. And so why aren't we? So for example, I did the original cataloging for the pamphlet Weighed in an Even Balance, the Leal's Defense. Again, only 11 OCLC member libraries own the book or have used my master record as copy of their catalogs. Of the 11 libraries, 10, I put a note describing the controversy, a very short, objective note about I said that in this book, the Leal, it's a summary note, the Leal defends his scholarship in Army in America, which won the Bancroft Prize in 2000. It was rescinded in 2001. It seems to me that is fairly objective. And I put that in the note for Weighted in Even Balance, and 10 of the libraries kept my note, one library removed it. But yeah, I mean, you have to be very careful not to put your own bias in the film.
Well, I would like the bias to be in there, but I was just wondering all the different ways that could be done. I think it would be interesting to, for example, even interview someone, an original cataloger who was, putting in something and see how that was taken up, as you mentioned, by the 10 libraries, and why did that other library choose to put it in?
Occasionally, I've had other libraries call me and ask me, what we've done. We've not done anything in our catalog for the original record. But and that Ames Public Library record is only one of the many records that can show the incredible bias in content enhancement catalogs. For example, the Library of Congress record points to only favorable reviews of the book and biographies of the author, which says he's still a professor at Emory. He hasn't been a professor at Emory for 12 years. So look at all of the false data in our bibliographic records, biased data, unethical data in our bibliographic records because of content enhancement.
And isn't leaving it blank, isn't that a position as well? I mean,
it's possible, but then are we really meeting our professional responsibilities to our users? I mean, students would have to be, it took me a great deal of time to find bad reviews of this book. And as an undergraduate writing a book on the Second Amendment, going to find those bad reviews. Well, an undergraduate is going to probably go to Google first to find out all kinds of nasty comments from gun activists about the book before he goes to the library catalog. So maybe there's a control there. But putting such notes in catalog records for bad books is one way that libraries can kind of maintain our relevance to researchers. Because, our hesitancy to do so, I think, is at least to undergraduates, tending to make us more and more irrelevant. Because they're not coming to libraries first for the information, they're going out on the web.
Oh, I was just going to add to what it's Austin and Melody were saying about ethical obligations of teaching, because it's interesting with ethics, in the original Hippocratic Oath, doctors are mandated to teach other doctors. And the same thing with a lot of information professionals' codes of ethics. Like there's this mandate of teaching. But it's interesting in more like hobbyist craft drums as well. Like if you go to any knitting circle, there are people who are teaching other people how to do things, right? You don't know how to do this, okay, I'll teach you, I'll show you this. And so there's this, do we consider it ethics? Probably not, but there's all kinds of teaching going on in these circles as well. So I'm not, I don't think it's just a professional based thing. The ethical obligation, I think it's much more, and just a comment to add to what the previous two had said.
Other comments? Oh.
Well, I was wondering if you had thought at all about the wording of the notes, because notes are usually keyword searchable.
Yeah. Leonard Hitchcock in that Journal of Academic Librarianship article insists that notes be put in the bibliographic record so they can be searchable, rather than relying on content enhancement from publishers' websites, for example, designed to sell books, not evaluate them. But yeah, I mean, important content-rich keywords in that note are important.
Well, and with care and writing, like I was telling
yes.
students, don't say this book is not about elephants.
Yeah. It's just, it seems like a monumental task, doesn't it? I mean, we're not going to go through our collections looking for the bad books in our collections, but at least those of us who are subject specialists, for example, I'm a history bibliographer at ISU, if we know something ad hoc, something plops in our lap, there's an issue with this book, and we're also the original catalog, or if we're not, we could construct a note, go to our original catalogers, and consider putting a note in the master record, which anyone can do. You don't have to have enhanced membership in OCLC to do that.
Philip, I think the note solution is a good one, but I'm also wondering about, as libraries, we're consumers of these products that we mash up with our catalogs, like links to reviews. And I know, working with a lot of electronic resource, we're always reporting out things that don't work or problems, and trying to get those vendors to then repair those problems. I mean, I see a lot of, for instance, ebooks where the title on the title screen is still some previous iteration, not how it was published, and I report those and they get fixed. Have you considered, or do you know if anyone has pushed some of these providers of links to reviews to, on this book particularly, link to the whole more balanced scope of what's out there?
I have not done that. I don't know anyone who has done that, but the ALA Library Bill of Rights and the Statement on Labeling encourage us to do that, because Article 2 of the Library Bill of Rights says that libraries should collect resources which represent all points of view on historical and current subjects. Absolutely impossible to do. That's impractical as a statement as an ethical principle to be followed. Likewise, the questions concerning the new labeling and rating systems, which is the new title for the statement on labeling, says that library that libraries should encourage their vendors to provide a wide array of reviews for import into their library catalogs. But as you can see, it's not happening. Even the Library of Congress record for that has only one good review. The University of Texas at Austin has done a much better job in pulling different reviews into their record. But yeah, that's what we're encouraged by our ethical principles to do.
All right. Others? Time for one more, I think. All right. Well, with that, I thank our two speakers. And I'd like to acknowledge the IORG group for their part of the sponsorship here. So if I could ask Hurley Lee to come up and say a few words.
Can I stand here? Oh. Hi, my name is Hurley Lee. I'm an associate professor here at the School of Information Studies, University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. I'm also the coordinator of our information organization research group, and we call it IORG for short. And we have several core members, we call, and Dr. Richard Smaragia and Dr. Hope Olson and Margaret Kim. Where is Margaret? And Steve Miller. Did I cover everybody, the core members? Yeah, we also have some affiliated members. Lynn Howard of University of Toronto is our distinguished researcher in information organization. We also have a postdoctoral fellow, Dr. Lei Zhang. She graduated from University of British Columbia recently. That's basically what our core group is. And we also have some student members. I don't think I can name them all. This past year, our group was established in 2008. I can't believe how time flies this fast, you know. And we've done a lot, and I would like to think we now have a pretty solid reputation internationally. And this past year, we all especially achieved significant, we've done a lot of work. And the most recent about this one is the best to end this year. And we recently finished a book, a collective book, Richard and I co-edited, which is titled Cultural Frames of Knowledge. The main theme of the book is epistemology and the knowledge organization. So, and I thought I was going to give you a slide of the cover to do a little bit of promotion. So, and I hope you will all buy a copy at least, or ask your library to buy a copy. And we, every year we have a few lectures, speeches. So Lynn comes 2 times a year to give talks. And we also try to balance research with more practice-oriented speeches. Like last fall, we invited the Marjorie Bloss here to talk about RDA, the recent developments of RDA. For the scholarly talk this year, we actually invited Joe, just in April, I think, right, to talk to us about his research. So we've done a number of different things to enrich this particular program here at UWM. And the next June, I think, can I say that? Okay. We're going to host the next Canadian U.S. chapter of the International Society for Knowledge Organization biennial conference. It takes place every other year, and it was held last year at the University of Toronto, I think. No, Ryerson University in Toronto. And next summer, it will be our turn to host the conference. I think it will be probably this time of the year. We don't know that yet, but I hope you will all look for the information and come to join us. Thank you very much.
All right, I just wanted to make a second reminder that if you want to opt out of sharing your contact information, you can do that at the desk. I'm sorry?
The activity.
Activity?
No, you said the sharing activity.
Oh, the sharing activity, right, sorry. Reminding me of my awkward sentence that constructed a whole new idea of activity, work. So yeah, the opting out, that's happening at the desk. You can do that at the break. And then if Melissa Adler's here, I'd like to see her real quick if I can. Otherwise, we'll call this first session closed and enjoy your break. We'll reconvene at 10:30.